went back down to Santa Cruz the next week, the day of Nick's office hour. I told nobody except Tila why I had to go down there again that particular day. Did not tell Mom the name of the professor whom I said I had to see about things, or the fact that he was no professor at all, just a visiting scholar. All I said was I had to pick up some forms and material for enrollment and grant applications. Mom took me over to Sonora to the Greyhound station before it was light hardly. Still, after what seemed like an endless ride through the fertile stink of the valley, I made it just barely in time for the office hour in the early afternoon. The bus up to campus smelled of herbal shampoo, the students freshly showered, every one of them, and at one stop there was something like a circus tent that had swallowed a whole house. Someone on the bus told someone next to him that the pest control folks were fixing to pump the house full of poison to get the termites out. It was a sight in the world. This time, when I came to his office, the door was open, with a grey metal folding chair propped against it to keep it open, and there was no one waiting. A square of sunlight fell out of the office onto the caramel linoleum floor, and when I peeked in, there was Nick, sitting at his desk, looking through papers while talking on the phone, and it was him all right. Not bothering to look closely, he motioned me to come in and sit down on the chair in front of his desk, while his eyes were somewhere behind me, looking through me. Even before he pointed at the chair, I had slowly begun to lower myself into it, holding my backpack before me like someone gut shot. He had hardly changed or none in all these years, and the voice that went into the receiver was the same voice that still spoke in my head from time to time. Except he no longer had the German accent, or just a trace of it, and he used all his tenses properly and words of many syllables. A man of letters, with erudition and papers from good schools, no longer long-haired, but neat and trim with receding hairline. His clothes were West Coast, the Gap, no nonsense, though he still had the tan, or had it back, some wrinkles and crow feet from spending too much time in the sun, the way most Europeans tend to do here. What was he doing here? How had he pulled this off? He had been so careless when we knew him, and now he looked so square. It was strange. From outside the window, you could hear the murmur of a class in session somewhere, the droning of a teacher's voice, then a voice shouting out on the patio and echoed by the buildings, "Red room tonight!" and the sound of the whole unseen class cracking up with laughter. They must have heard the girl through an open window, though I did not know what the joke was. Next to the half-empty bookshelves, there was a poster scotch-taped to the wall that I recognized because Mom had pinned a postcard of the same painting above her desk back home. There was not a doubt in my mind that he had put it there because he remembered that she liked it. Finding that picture there felt like seeing an old friend, and I just knew I had done the right thing coming here. The poster, though, was a reproduction of a 15th century painting of a Flemish girl in her finery. Aside from the painter's name, that is about all the caption tells you. When I was little and we still lived in San Francisco and Mom had the same postcard on the wall above her bed, I used to ask her to tell me the story of the girl, and she would remember exactly what she had told me the last time I asked, and the time before that, back to the time she had made up the story of the girl. It was as important to her as it was to me that nothing was added, nothing left out. While she told me the story, I would watch the girl for consent, and she would always seem reluctant to grant it. Cat got my tongue when the sound of Bakelite on Bakelite suggested that Nick would now turn to me, and when the sound of the scraping chair made it clear that he had already done so. I had come to say things to him I had rehearsed for the better part of a week, and for all of 10 years, harsh things and bitter. But when he turned to me with a smile that was meant for someone he did not know yet, I found that I could not speak at all. I quickly looked back at the poster. I must have looked like an idiot just sitting there, hugging my backpack and grinning shyly, soundlessly shaking my head, laughing when he finally said my name with a question mark behind it. He got up and came around the desk, all awkward but clearly happy to see me. Not until he stood before me and said my name again did I stand up and hug him, the backpack between us. Up close, and with the wire-rimmed glasses left behind on the desk, I saw in his face the years that had passed. At least no paunch, just a touch of grizzle in his hair, behind the ears. He was no more than 35 yet by my calculation, but that is old enough to someone not yet 20. Remember, Mom had this by her bed, pointing irrelevantly at the poster. I do. I'm surprised you remember, though. She's still got it. Where'd you get the poster? I brought it from Berlin. It's very cheap to get because it advertises the museum it hangs in. You see it in bus stops all over town. Berlin? Is that where you live? Did you go see the painting? I did. It's actually just small, cracked all over. It's very popular. I bet Mum would love to see it. How is she? She's fine. Does she know you're here? No, actually, she's not fine either. How come? Because, I don't know. She's just falling apart over the fact that I'll be leaving. I just finished school, you know. I find that hard to believe. I know. Anyway, she clings. She's lonely. And I'm like her only friend. Oh boy. Oh, so is she still taking pictures? Still doing the same old things. Landscaping, picture taking. And you? Will you be coming here? I wish. So... I told him about the internship I was going to do, and that by the end of it I would probably know for sure whether I had been accepted by UCSC or by some other school. I told him I had come down to see what all I needed for my application and what all of this would cost, and to pick up the paperwork, when I had mostly just come down to see him. Were we still living up in San Francisco? He wanted to know. And when I told him we were staying with Grandma, he asked me how far that was, and things like that. His interest seemed genuine, and he looked at me out of kind grey-green eyes. But it was hard to forget that we would have been easy to find if he had gone looking for us. He could have Googled Mom's name, or could have called Pacific Bell, and they would have told him, rare as our last name is. So I felt uneasy. You, though? I asked him back. What are you doing here? It's just a teaching assistant, he said, pointing at the desk, as if that explained anything. It doesn't pay much, but they waive your tuition. I'm really here for postgraduate work. What on? This author, Brautigan. Does he live here? No. He paused. No, he doesn't live here. So what, is this like a good place for you to study him, this Brautigan? Actually, Berkeley would be the place, but I still knew some of the professors here, and they wrote the recommendations I needed. Put in a word, I guess. So what do you live on? There was some grant money from his school in Berlin, and some savings from an inheritance, money from the parents. I remembered they had sent things even back then, though rarely ever money. Is this what you teach? I asked him about a book by Nabokov that was on his desk, face down. Perhaps it was the subject of the paper he was grading. He looked over as if he, too, wondered what the paperback was doing there, then nodded. We were still standing in front of his desk. Yeah, it's one of those things on the reading list of the postmodernism class. Why, have you read it? We watched the movie in school. I see, the new one, or the Kubrick one with Peter Sellers? I don't know. Was it colour or black and white? Colour, we were supposed to read the book too. But I didn't understand why it's supposed to be a great book. I thought it was awful and quit reading it. I thought it was stupid too. A bit boring, perhaps? Yes, I guess. The phone rang, and while he answered it, he kept looking at me, raising his eyebrows gravely, and looking at me when listening to the person at the other end, as if we both had expected and dreaded this call. But he smiled at the phone when he talked. He told the phone he was about to lock up, waited and looked grave, then told it to come to his class on Tuesday. He said it was not too late to make up for it, and not to worry. Right, he said after hanging up, rubbing his palm slowly, then turning to me. Listen, why don't I close shop and we go down and grab a bite to eat? I said, sure, wondering at the same time why he did not tell me that it was great to see me, or that I had grown and that I looked good, or like my mother. Some of the usual spiel that grown-ups will run past you after not having seen you for a while. His offhand manner almost made it seem as if we met on a weekly basis, or as if he had not missed us. But maybe this is just the way he was. Maybe it was not in him to display emotion. Perhaps a German thing along the lines of boys don't cry. Maybe socialization gone haywire, or a wholly different agenda of social skills, or simply a lack of sensitivity. I remember that even when I was little, he had almost never asked you how you felt or what was wrong, until you rubbed his nose in it or started crying. In fact, he hated it when you did, because he did not know how to deal with it. He hated it most of all when Mom cried, and she cries easily. He would think that he had done something wrong, like wanting to sleep with her too often, as if everything related to him. Perhaps it is a male thing too. How would I know? What made you think I found the novel boring? I asked on the way over to the East Remote parking lot, almost off campus. Because it's bound to be boring if the complexity is lost on you. What's the complexity? The discursive layers. Come again? I know, sorry. Sometimes you get so caught up in this academic claptrap. Let's see. What I'm trying to say is that the narrator is unreliable. He pulls the reader's leg. He wants the reader to interpret the story a certain way. Okay, I said, then added, isn't the story his to tell any way he wants to? Yes, but at the same time he might have something he wants to confess. Apart from that, the author has to make the book work, so ultimately you're right. He wouldn't have to make the narrator so complex if he did want him to get away with things. Wait, what's the difference between the author and the narrator? The narrator is the make-believe person addressing himself to the reader. So he's the one lying. But this Humbert doesn't even make himself sound like a good guy. You don't think so? Perhaps that's where he's smart. His car was a little red Toyota, which I found strange, though I could not have said what I had expected. A black, evil-looking Mercedes, perhaps, like the one in Grandma's shed. No, I said, as he was pulling out of the lot. I mean, she's clearly getting raped or molested or whatever, and he's just a dirty old man. There is actually this one passage where Lo cries at night, I remember. So you did read the book, he said, looking over at me, driving. Most of my students read right past that part, if they get that far, that is. Yeah, I guess I read most of it. It's only been 6 months or so. So he sounds honest to you, is that what you're saying? I don't know, I guess. Anyway, if this Humbert guy doesn't lie about having his way with Lowe, what does he lie about? He wants to pin the true blame on this guy named Quilty. Also, he wants you to believe that Lowe has provoked everything that's happened to her, sort of seduced him rather than vice versa. And that his passion is so great that it qualifies his temporary lapse of reason, to a degree, that is. But if that's what he believes and tells you so, he isn't actually lying, is he? Well said. The thing is, you can tell he is constructing this passion, or at least the melodrama of it. The prologue about his childhood love is a direct rewrite of Poe's Annabel Lee poem. Lake Hourglass is taken right out of Cooper and Dreiser. Plus, there is simply no such name as Humbert. It's a humbug, and says so. It's like NN for no name, and it's so ostentatious that the reader has no choice but to realize the manipulation of the narrative. So what is the true story? Where are we going anyway? To this Mexican place, I thought. Is that a good idea? He looked over again and I caught his eye. By the way he looked at me, I could tell he was beginning to see I was no longer the girl he had known. Sure, I said, smiling briefly. Whatever, keep talking to me. Okay, let's see. The true part is that she is the poor, seduced girl. So? So what? You tell me. You said it in this facetious tone of voice. What else is true? He watched me out of the corner of his eye, had actually slowed down, driving like a man much older, by mood rather than by traffic situation, holding people up on Bay Street just to check if I saw what he saw. You could tell these things were important to him. The reading of literature, the interpretation of tall tales. Nothing you'd need to know to pass my exam. And suppose I wasn't taking your exam and just going to this taco place with you. Supposing this, he laughed, liking it, speeding up. And supposing you had taught the book for years and had crossed into your 30s, you'd realise that there is a third level, and that it is simultaneously the most subtle and the most simple one of these meta-texts. What's a meta-text? An ulterior level of meaning, like the discourse underlying the animal's narrative in a fable, for instance. The message not literally articulated, but somehow implied. The fact this level is not needed to make sense of the surface discourse is actually what makes fables suitable for children. Okay, so what's the subtle meta-message? That you like to have young chicks even when you're old and decrepit, or above 30. He nodded appreciatively, grinned, and almost missed his turn. Now, here's the Nina I remember. I could not help grinning when he had said it, but did not look at him. You can't call me that anymore, though. Nina. Okay, fair enough. But you're very perceptive, if I may say so. You'd be an asset to this class of freshman brainiacs. So, anyway, the third narrative says something like, yes, Humbert is a monster, and Lowe is a little brat, but when everything is said and done, they're both just very lonely, and their desire very real. Sure, she is the suffering one, the Mater Dolorosa, as her name Dolores suggests, but she is also the burnt child that loves the fire. She likes being desired and perishes of the ennui of her underdog life later on. He, in turn, truly loves her, even as he over-dramatizes it to seem wily rather than weak. He would give and give up anything to keep her, and he has nothing left to live for once it is clear she won't come back to him. He dies after telling his tale. All of this makes him rather human. You're practically defending the old child molester now. You'd almost think so, wouldn't you? Anyway, what am I doing running off at the mouth about books? As you can tell, I tend to get carried away. He parked the car in a lot behind the restaurant on Soquel that actually belonged to a laundromat. He did not speak again until we were on the sidewalk out front, but he was clearly still absorbed, walking absent-mindedly, and finally adding, "You see, the tragic tension of their impossible desires, his and hers, holds the whole narrative together. The tragic aspect being that he commits himself to his disastrous fate fully aware of it, and while he could have easily avoided it."